It's so important to brush your teeth. So.
My box! Oh, this is fantastic! My body has arrived from China. Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to Brain Mail. I have always wanted to dissect a human body, and I got one from, where else would you get it from but China. Let's open this up. It didn't take that long to get here. Instruction manual, but I'm a doctor. I don't need the manual. I know the name of the parts. There's a head with just, it looks like half a brain. Oh boy. This is the universal genital pack, the androgynous person. The male sex organs. This is the missing half of the brain. Eyeball. There's parts of the spinal cord, I'm assuming. And the body. Okay. So we have the head, which has a skull, just like this guy right here. Here's the skull. There's two pins here with two holes on the bottom. Does a real human being have two pins on the back of their head? No. And we have the brain. This green part is the cerebellum. And if that's damaged, like in alcoholics, they have this wide-based gait called ataxia. That's the brain stem, this pink deal here, and that controls breathing, heart rate, and digestion. So we will just drop that in there. So there's the right half of the brain. If you had a stroke, you would probably damage some function going on here, and then you'd end up probably paralyzed in your left arm, let's say, because the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Okay, let's go to the back side of our model. Look at all this flesh that's been cut out here. This is all muscle that is protecting the spinal cord, which is shown in yellow here, and all this white is bone. Here's an actual skeleton. Here's what they call the vertebral column, and the vertebral column is made of individual bones called vertebrae. There's cervical vertebrae, 7 of them. There's 12 thoracic vertebrae attached to the thorax, and the ribs are attached to those. There are 5 lumbar vertebrae. This is where people have lots of back pain generally. And here's the sacrum, where all these vertebrae are actually fused together into one block. In this model, they've cut away all the flesh, and here's one of the cervical vertebrae. C1 and C2 are the axis and the atlas. Atlas holds up the world, so the atlas is C1. This is a thoracic vertebrae. That's called the spine. These are called facets. A lot of people have what's called like facet joint pain. They'll get injections here. It'll take their pain away for a couple weeks. Here's a lumbar vertebrae, and that's called a superior articular facet. We'll do these on another video. These are inferior articular facets. These are transverse processes. That hole right down the middle is where the spinal cord goes. And the spinal cord is about the thickness of, say, my index finger, and contains 20 million nerve fibers, some of it running vertically, taking sensory information to the brain, some of it running downwards, descending information to instruct the limbs to move. If you had a spinal cord injury, the bone might get fractured, and then the bone will sever the cord, and if the cord got severed here, then that person's going to be paraplegic. Their legs are going to be paralyzed. This is the shoulder blade. This whole piece here is called the shoulder blade. That is the shoulder blade, and that's called the spine of the scapula. Not to be confused with the actual spine. So this sharpness that you feel running along here is the spine of the scapula. Find it on your friends. What they've shown here is the, I'm so sorry. This is the humerus, the upper arm bone, which is here. There's a shaft, and then there's the ball of the humerus, which they've shown here, and the ball sits here and it articulates with the shoulder blade, forming the actual shoulder joint. So that's the back side of our model. Moving on, we have the eye, and there's muscles that make the eye go up, down, left, right, turn in, and turn out. There's 6 muscles that actually control the eyeball. And let's just keep moving down the body. What you're seeing here, this green stuff here is the cartilage in the neck. So this is actually called thyroid cartilage right here. So if James Bond does like a karate chop in a movie, they always do it here. Underneath is the thyroid gland, which controls your metabolism of your body. So you can be hyperthyroid, where it's overactive, and then you need medicine to make it go quieter. Or you can have a hypothyroid condition where you need to actually take thyroid hormone. So those are pretty common conditions. This is pectoralis muscle here. And as you can see, the fatty tissue of the breast is actually this stuff right here on top of the pectoralis muscle, which is involved with this motion of the arm. And if we turn this around, this bone is the sternum, which would be this bone right here. And then you're seeing all these ribs on the back. And when you go for ribs night, these are the ribs and that's the muscle that you're eating. Next we have the right lung and the left lung. There's a notch in the left lung for the heart actually. It's called the cardiac notch. You can have lots of things go wrong with the lungs. I mean, you could get lung cancer, and the lungs have lobes actually. So there's like a superior lobe, a middle lobe, inferior lobe. And if a person had cancer, they can actually do a lobectomy, take out one part of the lung, or they can do an entire lung gone called a pneumonectomy. And if we were gonna put it over here, it would kind of be in the chest cavity like this. These are kind of small for this guy right here. And I'll go there. So here's the heart right here. And if it was me, it would be sitting kind of here. The heart kind of sits a little bit off to the left side. And if it was in this dude right here, the heart would be kind of sitting around here. And just putting it back in for a second, the big fat artery that comes out of the heart is the aorta. All the blood coming out of the heart that's gonna nourish the body is in the aorta. These red deals here in the neck, these are the carotid arteries. So if you take your pulse here, or you take your pulse here, you can feel the pulsation of the right carotid artery and the left carotid artery. So when somebody does like some gangland killing and they cut your neck, you're gonna bleed to death from your carotid arteries. All this blood at high pressure. Coming into the heart, blue representing like veins, what they call venous blood that doesn't have much oxygen in it. So you got the jugular veins on the right and left side of the neck that are gonna dump into this big vessel here called the superior vena cava. You probably learned that in grade 12 biology. So let's take the heart out. These are 2 of the 4 valves in the heart. If you have a heart attack, the heart stops beating, or a portion of it dies and that portion's not beating, you can die. It's a fatal heart attack. And let's move on. So this whole area here, kind of in the top half of the body, is called the thorax. And surgeons that work in this area are called thoracic surgeons. Those that work on the heart would be cardiac surgeons. Moving down, we have the abdomen. If you look like a wasp, it has a head, it has a thorax and an abdomen. We have the same plan. We have a head, we have a thorax, we have an abdomen. What we see up front here, we have the liver. The liver is a large organ. We can see the edge of the stomach here. On the outside, we have the large intestines, and in the middle here, we have the small intestines. Let's remove these one by one, just like an old school grave robber. So here's the liver. The liver is a very large, important organ. It metabolizes drugs. If you had an overdose of Tylenol, also known as acetaminophen, it's the liver that is going to metabolize the drug. And if you took an excessive amount, you can actually cause liver failure. So respect your liver. The other thing the liver does is it turns sugar, like as in glucose, turns it into glycogen, which is a storage form. So stores it here. And then when you need it, the glycogen is converted back to glucose. On the back side of the liver is the gallbladder. And lots of people come to the hospital and say, I've got pain over here. This is called the red upper quadrant. And it's their gallbladder that's causing them pain. And maybe the gallbladder has to be removed because there's sometimes stones form in here, gallbladder stones, gallstones they call them, and sludge forms in here and it can block the exit of the bile. And the bile actually dumps into the small intestine, which is here. Okay, so that's the liver, which would kind of live here, by the way. So the liver normally sits about right here. The liver is considered an abdominal organ, but it's protected by the ribs, so it's kind of got a bit of a thoracic, like the thorax component. So it's technically considered something in the abdominal cavity. Next we have the stomach sitting right here. So let's remove the stomach. By the way, this kind of tape is not found in the human body. This is artificial. This is the stomach. The stomach sits approximately here, and it has what's typically described as like a J shape. That's called the greater curvature on this side, and this is considered the lesser curvature here. And if it was here, it would be kind of sitting somewhat like this. You can split the stomach open, and it has these interesting wrinkles inside called rugae. If you have an ulcer in your stomach, you can actually get a perforation right through the wall of the stomach. That would be called a perforated ulcer, as in or technically we would call it a perforated gastric ulcer. So lots of efforts goes into making sure that the amount of acid produced is not eating a hole through the wall of the stomach. Next, we have the decent representation of the small and large intestine. So if you eat food, it goes in your mouth, down your esophagus, which you cannot see here. The esophagus is a food pipe. It's actually behind the windpipe, and it will emerge here, go into the stomach, and then the stomach is gonna go into the intestines. It's a concept of a picture and a picture frame. So the frame is formed by the large intestine, also known as the colon, and inside the picture frame is the small intestines. So you have 23 feet of small intestines, all extracting the nutrients out of the food, and then you have the large intestine, which is 5 feet long. So all that fits nicely right in the abdominal cavity. So it would kind of be like this, sitting here. This is the pancreas. The pancreas makes insulin. Insulin allows sugar, that is to say glucose, to get into cells. Glucose must have insulin in order to get into a cell. So that's why the pancreas is very important. If you're not making enough insulin, that is diabetes by definition. So that's the major thing the pancreas does. And you're seeing here a little bit of the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. And that's where the bile from the gallbladder dumps into here. So let's take that out. What fell out here is this is the right kidney. So they basically like cut the kidney vertically here. There's a right kidney and a left kidney. If you're a boxer, you do a kidney punch and it's kind of painful. Each kidney has 1 million tiny filters that filters the blood, and from that, urine is formed. If you have kidney failure, you need sometimes dialysis so that the blood is cleaned by a machine and then put back in the body. Over here to the left, this black thing that doesn't come out is the spleen. And the spleen's job in life, one of its jobs is to take red blood cells. And we make about 2 to 4 million red blood cells every second in our body. And they live 120 days or so, and then they die. And the spleen takes them out of circulation. I believe in animals like horses, the spleen is actually quite effective, acting like as a form of a transfusion. So it can actually contract and force a bunch of red blood cells into the circulation of this horse that just got shot or whatever, or is being attacked by coyotes. Okay, so this is interesting. The word adrenaline is the word you want to key in on here. So the word renal means kidney, and if we put the word ad on there, we get the word adrenal, which literally means on top of the kidney. So the adrenal gland makes adrenaline. So it's made in both adrenal glands. The other word for kidney is nephros, and another word meaning upon is epi. So we have epinephrine. And adrenaline and epinephrine are exactly the same compound, which is what's liberated when you're basically under a lot of stress. And going down here, if you remember, so we had the heart sitting here. So the aorta is the big, huge artery coming out of the heart, and it makes an arch, and then it comes down into the abdomen. So you have what's called the arch of the aorta. You have what's called the thoracic aorta, and then the this segment here is called the abdominal aorta. So it's all this blood is essentially giving oxygen to all these organs in the abdominal cavity. It splits into the left and right common iliac artery, which are then going to supply organs in the pelvis and also go down into the legs. So you don't want to get shot here or like samurai sworded. Avoid that if possible. This happens to be the female reproductive organs. This is pretty cool. So if we actually split this down the middle, there's a little fetus here. Hello. So that's the uterus, and the fetus sits in the uterus. This would be the urinary bladder. This would be the vagina, and this would be the rectum. So all that would go back together like so. So that's the female genital organs. This is the male sex organs. So there's a right testicle, there's a left testicle, there's one penis. This is the urinary bladder. A man does not have a uterus, which is why women have babies and men don't. That's the urethra carrying urine out of the urinary bladder. And if you remember, the kidneys are here and here. They make urine, and the ureter carries urine from the kidney to the bladder. There's only one urinary bladder. There's a right ureter, there's a left ureter taking urine into the urinary bladder. The word bladder, by the way, there's two bladders. There's a urinary bladder and there's a gallbladder. A bladder is just a sac. Do not confuse them, they're totally different. This contains bile, which is used for basically breaking down fat in the small intestine. And the urinary bladder, also a sac of a kind, is for storing urine. And then it contracts and urine comes out. And we have a rectum, and this is the prostate gland right here. Older males sometimes can get enlargement of the prostate, so sometimes surgery is done. Interestingly, if there's prostate cancer, which has to be distinguished from an enlarged prostate, the doctor does what's called a DRE, a digital rectal exam, where he sticks his finger through his anus into his rectum and feels if the edge of the prostate here is hard and enlarged. And if it is, it can actually be felt this way. So that's why this kind of screening is done on male. I do apologize. I was so rude and didn't even introduce the name of our friends who I've been touching, some of them inappropriately. This is Francis, the androgynous person, and this is Wyatt. That was an overview of the body. Future episodes, we are going to be featuring different organs going down the body, and sometimes probably even 2 episodes on a particular organ if it's interesting. So until next time, thanks for joining, and remember, you are amazing at multiple levels on your body, which you are going to discover. Thanks again. This is C1, which is called the axis. No. C1, yeah, C1 is axis, atlas. Okay, I look really bad here. C1 and C2 are the axis and the atlas, or the other way around. I shouldn't really be allowed to graduate from medical school getting those backwards. I apologize to everybody in medicine. That's my multiple choice answer.